What up, Hepsters? Monsiezy here, Intangible Roots. Welcome back to another knowledge drop. Today's knowledge drop, we're going to discuss why ballet is not the foundation of all dance forms. I don't know why we're still having this discussion. Mathematically speaking, ballet began in the mid 15th century. So even if we started at year 1400, that means ballet would only be 625 years old. So are people trying to tell us that human beings didn't exist before that? Let's get into it. This is going to be pretty interesting. Let's go. Primitive man developed ritual dance actions for every event in their life, for birth, coming of age, at a wedding, curing the sick, burying the dead, even a child's initiation. And dance is often, or was often, an initiation of courage, right? To decide if a young child was fit to wield a spear as a member of their tribe. So there's a rites of passage, right? A way to prepare them for adulthood. Now let's take a journey through time. For my religious people in the room, the Bible of Exodus tells us how after the crossing of the Red Sea, Miriam of the prophetess, the sisters of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels, which is a tambourine, and they danced. Even David danced before the Lord over 3,000 years ago. Tai Chi is believed to have been created between the 11th and 14th century. And that totally beats the age of ballet. Bharatanatyam, or Hindu dances, emerged in the Hindu temples as a form of worship 2,000 years ago. So, and then Bharata may derive from words which mean outward expression of spiritual feelings, melody, and rhythm, right? So there's different meanings behind these practices as well. It's not just people jumping around. The Schuppler, a slap dance where dancers slap their hands on their legs and shoes, dates back to 3000 BC. The Paleo Indians lived some 10,000 years ago and had various dances for hunting rituals, seasonal changes, social dances for communal gatherings. The earliest inhabitants of southern Africa were the San people, also known as Bushmen, who are believed to have arrived in the region between 260,000 to 130,000 years ago. And they have a dance called the Riel. Okay, so we know that people inhabited the planet for thousands of years, right? So what's the real question here? Like, what are we really talking about? Why would anyone think that ballet is the foundation of all dances when clearly we know people all over the world danced before ballet was ever thought of? My suggestion is that the problem lies with the monarchs of Europe. Around 1450, Italian dance masters first derived a choreographed dance known as the Ballo, Ballo, or ballet, Balli, or the ballet, Balletti. These were the precursors to ballet. In 1533, Catherine de' Medici of Italy married Henry II of France. And during their reign, Catherine introduced dances such as the Pavane, the Galliard, and the Volta by bringing Italian dance masters who taught the members of French aristocracies. And not only did this aristocracy dominate politics, it also dominated dance. This concept of sovereignty that people thought ballet was the ultimate dance. Because even people of their own country to be would be viewed as less than or peasants if they couldn't do or couldn't learn, didn't have the leisure to learn the dances that were being performed in court. The pavane, the social function of this dance symbolized grace, decorum, nobility. Dancers often wore elaborate attire and moved with controlled elegance. The Galliard, its social function showcased physical agility and flirtation, often space for men to demonstrate their virility and control. Now, the thing I want you to keep in mind, these are social dances. These are dances that are bringing people together. You know, you're looking for a partner in life, or maybe there's a political alliance, whatever it is. And you see the lifts that are happening. You see the agility of the feet and the jumping. This is supposed to show, this is the moment that the men get to show off, you know, their abilities and agilities. And the lifting is part of the social decorum that's showing like, I am a capable suitor, that I am strong enough to support you and to lift you. This is what this movement is shows. So even when you look at ballet, a lot of those gestures are courting gestures that have a relationship between a male being someone who is dependable, who can support you, who can lift you, that you can count on and such. And that gets lost. Like now it's all performative. So I just wanted to point that out. That when you're looking at these, you're looking at social dances that have particular gestures that suggest what that suggest ideas of who the people are and what they provide or bring to a relationship. The next dance we're going to look at is the Volta. Now, the Volta was a scandalous dance. The Volta is sort of the precursor to the Viennese waltz. And the social function of the Volta, it was considered a daring and sensual dance. It was often performed as a form of provocative variation of the Galliard. And the difference with the Volta, the lifts, is that the partner would sort of turn just off to the side and rest her butt on the gentleman's leg, and he would use his leg to pull her up and sort of make a half turn, volta meaning turn. And the scandalous part was that the dress that the woman would have on has a sort of a wire busk under the dress to make it flare out around the hips. And while one arm is wrapped around the woman, the other arm would grab the busk, which is between the legs, and then they would lift. And so that was part of a scandalous because the skirt would come up, and that's what made it scandalous. But here is the Volta. This next dance is called the Brannels, and its social function is highly communal, inclusive. It's danced by all classes of people. It's weddings or festivals, even court entertainments. So here's the Brannels. Because of these social dances, this is where the five positions were introduced. Dances like the Galliard, the Volta, or the Courante, or the Gavotte, the Allemande, these were simple dances, right? Dances of the people. But once they were made into this quote unquote professional dances, now they required specific steps, patterns, and posture. Although the five positions were taught by, quote unquote dance masters, they were not fully standardized until Charles Bouchon defined them while he was the royal dance master for King Louis XIV. As a matter of fact, you can see, so they would put out these books, these dance masters books, right? How to do all these dances. This is one of those books. This is The Dancing Master by Pierre Ramon. I don't know if you pronounce that right. I don't speak French. But I just want to read you a bit of this so you understand a little bit more about these five positions. And so what this says is of the positions and their origin. What is termed a position is nothing more than a separation or bringing together of the feet according to a fixed distance while the body is maintained upright and equilibrium without any appearance of constraint, whether one walks, dances, or comes to a stop. And that's the key thing because it's a basic position of the skeletal structure. It's just a basic position on how we can stand. Now, ballet folk seem to consider like these five positions like these are special things. Now, for me, I don't. I simply look at them as I just stated, they are the most efficient way for the skeleton to stand upright, right? So let's compare the five positions with just some ways that people stand, just to sort of add a different layer of context to this. All right. Here's a photo of the basic five positions, right? You see first position, second position, third position, fourth, and fifth. Now, I'm really just going to look at one, two, and three, right? So you have this closed stance. It's not necessarily parallel, but the heels are closed. There's 45-degree angles. And we have a wider stance at a 45-degree angle. I'm not so much focused about the arms in this. And for the third, the heel of the right leg is at the archway of the left. And for in hip hop, we would call this standing on the square, right? Because you're using the lines of a square to create your stance. Now, you see these and they're taught specifically for these ballet positions. Again, these come from social dances that existed before the codifying of ballet. Now, when we take another look at some hip hop photos from back in the day, we still see this 45-degree angle. Now, trust me, these young men were not in ballet class. But this is I'm demonstrating that this is just a proper way to stand. So it's not the specificity that's placed on this about dance is just again another ideology, a concept. And so we see that this was almost gives you a second position. This is sort of a second. It's not necessarily a 45-degree turn, but you see where I'm going with this. This young man right here is almost his legs a bit forward, but he's almost giving us that third position. When we look at these photos here, we see that third position being demonstrated. This was just a common way for people to stand. There is nothing overtly special about this. But again, the hierarchy that gets taught in these dance classes suggests that these things are quite special. And I'm just saying that we can find this as common practice amongst human beings in other forms when we look beyond the dance itself. Deidre Sklar in her work was a big component of like looking beyond the dance to get at its meaning. So this is just another way to think about it. Now there are some other things that I could use this time to talk about. I'll let you do that research. You do the research on a tutu and when the tutu was invented. That helped to usher in more women into the dance. Understand the significance of lifting as it applies to that social decorum of how a man was supposed to show their ability to support and see what that meaning is. So you're looking at the jumping and the lifting around that. Um, and to kind of cut back in to the title of all of this, why ballet is not the foundation of all dance. And let me be clear, I love ballet dancing. I love the form. And I'm not saying anything against the form itself. It is the ideology that comes with the form that is sort of the stain on the art. Now, you're talking about, or we get into this, it is the foundation of all dances, but I know ballet dancers who've been training for 20 plus years and cannot simply just do this. Can't find the groove and it just looks awkward. Um, and that just shows you like that's not going to allow you to do this movement, that you struggle with this. Like you can't even find that because the body has not been trained to do that. So it can't be the foundation of all dances. So, in conclusion, we think about hierarchy, right? Now, let's be clear about something. There is no such thing as hierarchy in dance. I know people say it, but it's not really a thing. And this is the habit we have to get out of. So, what we have to realize is that we're talking about socio-cultural differences, but no one dance form or culture is better than another, right? Breaking is just as elegant as ballet. No one has a monopoly on what is proper. Like, what does that even mean? We're following the ideas, the concepts of somebody. It's like having influencers now. And these were people like Charles Bouchon was the influencers of their day. And so people would say, well, this is what we're supposed to do. Uh, if some of you might have heard me mention before in my locking breakdown, which is also on the YouTube channel, that Bo Nash, he was the one that shifted the dress decorum, where men would no longer wore high boots, knee-high boots, and got them to wear loafers because they would wear loafers with high socks and knickers because the loafers gave you better agility with your ankle to dance. So there are people who their influencers have been around for the longest time. And this is what we're following. So we're really looking at a mindset that reeks of a certain classism that suggests that these things are more proper. I remember being at a studio once, and the young woman there, she was the daughter of the person that owned the studio, and she was trying to tell me how much everybody needed ballet. And I was like, I don't do ballet, and I do a number of different dances. And she's like, well, it's good for balance. I'm like, you can get balance in gymnastics, you can get balance in martial arts, you can get balance in a lot of different things. So, and oftentimes there's just an aesthetic difference. So the same muscles that you use in ballet in terms of your core, in terms of how your glutes are being used, or your hamstrings, your quads, these are the same muscles that you access in doing hip hop. The exact same muscles. But there's just an aesthetic difference. So again, we talk about social cultural differences, but there is no such thing as hierarchy. And I think that becomes part of the problem. Just as our culture and lived experience is the basis for our values, so are other people's cultures based on their values, right? All cultures are equally valid and worthy of study and respect. And to claim any priority for one's own moral system over any other, this reflects an ignorance of the world's amazing cultural diversity and a degree of ethnocentrism that can easily slide into the xenophobic, racism, and sexism spot. For my teachers, I have some suggested reading for you, right? if you're trying to figure out how to introduce more cultural relevant practice into the dance where it's just not about performance, but they're actually learning about the gestural practice and so on. One book I would think of is Alda Alda Miranda Wolf. This is Cultures of Belonging. Boom, 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 boom. You should check that out. You could also check out Niyama McCarthy Brown. She has a book called Dance Pedagogy for a Diverse World. Boom, boom, boom. I would get it. And Dance and Belonging. This is by Crystal U. Davis. It's really helpful, really great ideas, how to talk about culture in class. And lastly, I would suggest by Lee Crunk, That Complex Whole. All right, this looks a little blurry, so I hope y'all got that. Camera's acting a little funny. So those were some recommendations that I would offer. As you get, they are really helpful in how you can sort of engage the conversation and bring this information into the class. Now, as for students, what is my suggestion? Well, the next time that anyone suggests that ballet is the foundation of all dances, I want you to remember some really simple things, and we talked about it. That ballet is less than 700 years old, while classical Indian, African, and other culture dances are thousands of years old, right? Another point, if ballet was the foundation of all dances, then they should have no problem doing hip hop or doing breaking or doing African. They should have no problem just sitting back into this groove if it is the foundation of all dances, right? I've seen ballet dancers really struggle with that. I mentioned that earlier. And that is, it's just that, right? Having this information, being mindful about how we're looking at it, and being mindful that there was a hierarchy in terms of these monarchs, this aristocracies, that they even look down upon their own people. So there are so many dances, when we talk about dance, or when I hear people talk about dance, they always take this ballet approach. Well, European dances were heavenward orientation. Not all. Not all. There's a lot of folk dances throughout Europe and the different countries that some of them are grounded, some of them are improvisational. I'm gonna list a few dances that you can look up that are before ballet and that are improvisational. There's so much information in there. So when we're talking dance and you start talking about Europe, people are fixated on ballet. And they usually just talk about that. We have all these classes, world of dance and so on. So you're not covering the world of dance. You know how many dances there are in the world? You're not covering that. No one is covering that. It's just a label for a class. And they barely get into anything. But usually when it comes to European dances, most of the time they're talking about ballet. And, there's Balkan dances. There's dances all over Europe that you can really look at. So I'll have just a short list of some other dances. So again, just because, you have to think of it like this, just because you can speak one language doesn't mean you'll be able to speak another language using that grammatical structure. You need to know the grammatical structure of the targeted language that you're trying to speak. You need to learn the syntax and the morphology, the lexicon. So just you have one language don't mean you can speak another. And just because you can do one dance form does not mean that one dance form is going to set you up to do all the other dance forms that you might have access to. If ballet is the foundation, let me see some people tap. Maybe that might be easy, but I don't know. So thank you all for sitting in on this knowledge drop. I think that will do it for today, right? Help us grow this algorithm. You know what it is. Hit the like button, leave us a comment, share with your friends, share on your page. Definitely subscribe so you can know when we're going to do or drop something new, or when I do start going live straight to YouTube, you will be in the know. This here is Monsizi, and I am signing out. Intangible Roots, Knowledge Drop. Peace.